A controversial story coming out last week was that Tony Ferguson did not receive his full show money for the fight with Khabib Nurmagomedov after Khabib had pulled out of that fight. He was scheduled to make $250,000 show, $250,000 a win, and the exact number that he was given wasn't put out, but they were saying it was somewhere in the six figures. So if we're just going to go the lowest possible end of what was reported, we'll say that he got $100,000 in show money. So there are a few ways to look at this. The first question is, was the UFC breaking any kind of law and not paying him his show money? The answer to that is no. The UFC legally is in the clear here. They don't have to pay him anything. By law, they could have given him absolutely nothing. If you look at Khabib, for example, now Tony's argument again is that he had to spend a lot of money on the camp. He spent all this time, all this work to get to that fight where he was expecting to make a certain amount of money, and now he's not getting any. Well, if you look on Khabib's end, I mean, same type of thing for him. He's getting all ready, and then all of a sudden his body fails on him. So now he's got to deal with the medical bills too, you'd imagine. Plus, he's not going to make anything off of his camp either. So for fighters to put in a lot of money or time for a camp, and then for a fight to fall through and for them to get nothing, that happens. It's just tough to see with Tony's case where it wasn't his fault that it happened. So it's nice that the UFC did pay him something. It's nice that they paid him six figures. But whether that was the right thing to do, whether they should have paid him his full show money, that enters a gray area. Legally, what the UFC did was not only okay, but then they went beyond it. If the UFC gave him absolutely nothing, they would have been legally fine. So there are a few things here. It's what's legal and what's ethical. The UFC in no way did anything illegal. They're completely legal. Now, as far as what's ethical, this is where it gets interesting. Now, a point that Tony made, and a good point at that, is that heading into that fight, the UFC had budgeted a certain amount of money for that fight. They had already budgeted away at least the $250,000 in show for Tony. So for them to come back and say, oh, well, we don't have the full $250 for you, that's horseshit. And that's a fair point. Now, obviously, I'm not entirely sure what all goes into their budgets. I'm sure that part of their budget includes a forecast of what they're going to make on the card. Losing the Tony and Khabib fight, I would imagine, brought a big hit to that because you had a lot of fans from Russia, a lot of fans in general that even that I spoke to, that they were viewing the Tony versus Khabib fight as the main event, and that was the fight that they were most interested in seeing, really the only one that they cared about seeing for the most part. The card seemed to fall apart to the point where Orlando Venata and David Tamer, which was a great fight, but as far as name value, as far as being able to sell, that's not exactly the co-main you would expect. So for Tony, I agree on his end that they had that money stored away. They had it budgeted away. They should be able to give it to him. On the UFC's end, if you're expecting a certain amount of money based off of a projection with the fact that you're getting that fight coming in, and now all of a sudden that fight's no longer there, you don't have Tony versus Khabib anymore, and you're going to lose a bunch of pay-per-view sales, maybe that's an adjustment they had to make. But again, it feels like if you're the UFC, just for a PR standpoint, it's probably worth paying out Tony his full $250. You've got the money. The bad press right now isn't going to be all that helpful. Again, it's complicated. I'd like to pick a side on this and say I'm totally with Tony. Tony got screwed. Tony should have gotten his $250. Or to be able to say, hey, the UFC didn't have to pay you anything. Be happy you got it at least 100 G's. But I feel like this is a complicated issue. It's good that the UFC is paying something. It's good that they're helping out a little bit. But I can definitely understand why Tony would be upset that he did absolutely nothing wrong. He made weight. He prepared. He did everything he could to be ready for Khabib. Khabib, no shows. And now all of a sudden, not only is he out of an opportunity to win the $500,000 and then get the interim belt, which then gets him a huge title fight, which guarantees him a title fight with Conor McGregor, but now he's getting about $100,000 and doesn't really get anything for it. And fans, we like to talk about, oh, well, Floyd Mayweather fought for this amount of time and he made $70,000 per second. What a great job it is. The time that you spend fighting is just dwarfed by the time you spend training, the time you spend preparing, the sacrifices you make in training. That's really where the money is earned. So Ferguson put in all the work and he's not getting compensated entirely well for the work that he did. And that's tough.